My last night in France. I'm heading back home to the U.S. tomorrow. Now, so right now I'm back in northern France in a little town called Roubaix. And now this town is where my wife kind of grew up, and as you can see, we're kind of near where she grew up, and so relatively humble beginnings. This is a town that doesn't have a lot of economic prosperity anymore. One of the reasons she left France was she felt that there was very limited opportunity to be successful, and no matter how hard you worked, how smart you were, how diligent you were, that you would be limited, as that's what the society kind of allows for. In many ways, it's very difficult to be successful in many of the European nations, compared to where you might have more opportunity in the United States. I think that's one of the nice things about the so-called American dream, that anyone can potentially, if they work hard enough, and obviously luck is involved, or sometimes nepotism or whatever it might be, but there are ways that people that start on a lower economic strata may find a way up to achieving more. And I think that's something that a lot of people here kind of accept, that this is what it is and there's no way to improve it. And if you're going to stay here, this is kind of what you are left with. And many people are happy where they are. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the people in many cases are very happy in many ways, because you're happy with family, you're happy with having a roof over your head and access to food. Let me just go through some of the comparisons. I spent a decent amount of time in France. I've been to Europe many times now. This is probably represents my 6th or 7th trip now, and so and seen various different countries. But specifically on this trip, we spent time in France, Spain, and Portugal. Of those 3 countries, quite honestly, I probably enjoyed or felt I liked Portugal probably the best of those countries. I've been to France many times. As I said, my wife's from here, and so there are a lot of neat things about Europe. Incredible cultural history, incredible old buildings. I like the walking society. I mean, it's very easy to walk around. In fact, you need to kind of walk around. It's very difficult to drive in many ways. Things are kind of small for me. Being at 6'5", I find it hard. Even just getting a lot of the cars are small. Myself kind of scrunching in just to fit in a car, and some of those things. And a lot of the stuff is just not made for bigger people, I guess. Like there's just, the space is a little more confined here. And so, I found a little bit. We were in Amsterdam through a flight, and a little bit taller people in Amsterdam. In fact, Amsterdam, I think Netherlands has the highest or the tallest population in Europe, and then in Portugal, I think has the smallest. So it's kind of an interesting contrast to see those 2 countries. But from the food standpoint, obviously there are more what appears to be fresh, whole, unprocessed sources of food here for sure. There's certainly junk food on the shelves, and certainly people are eating them, and certainly we're seeing more and more obesity and metabolic disease sweeping through Europe, just like we saw through America. It's probably 20 years behind would be my estimate. But I gotta be honest, I prefer the meat in the U.S. I mean, just for whatever reason. Maybe it's because they cut the steaks so damn thin here. You go to the store, and granted, I don't live here, and I don't have, I wasn't dealing with a butcher and getting things custom cut. But I mean, you go to a U.S. grocery store, and it's not unusual to find an 1.5 inch, 2 inch thick cut ribeye steak. Where here, everything's cut, 1/2 inch at most, and those are difficult, in my view, to prepare well. I mean, I think, particularly if you like a steak well seared with a nice medium rare inside, it's challenging to do that with those thin cuts of meat. And the meat tends to be a little tougher. It's a little more expensive. On a whole, I mean, the price parity in some ways is a little cheaper than the U.S., even with some of the red meat. However, given the discrepancies in income between what you would make in the U.S. versus what you make here, it's relatively more expensive, I would say. I think that the one thing I mentioned the last few, dairy products are quite good here. The cheese, obviously, in France and Spain and Portugal, for that matter, was quite good, as are the yogurts and things like that, which I definitely indulged in while I was here. Driving, it's interesting. You can drive. I drove from Amsterdam down here to northern, France. I drove through basically, into 3 countries, across the Netherlands, through Belgium, and then of course into France, and that whole trip took me less than 3 hours. And so that's, you span 2 countries in 3 hours. In the U.S., I mean, you don't even get, a quarter of the way through Texas in 3 hours. So I mean, it's kind of a different perspective. I drove across the whole of Spain from east to west in about 6.5 hours, and it kind of reminded me, one thing about Spain was it very much reminded me of the desert southwest of the United States in many ways, driving across the outskirts of, we were near Alicante, and we drove towards Merida, across the middle of La Mancha, the man from La Mancha, yes, reference to the Don Quixote, if you guys are Cervantes fans. It very much reminded me of driving across New Mexico, Arizona, out towards Barstow in California. Everybody's been there. So not really great scenery, to be honest. It wasn't until you get to the coastal areas that it seems to be okay. And even, like I said, I think of the three countries, I prefer Portugal probably the best. Not to say, there aren't great regions and all these, and I saw limited fractions. I've been to some beautiful places in France before, and I'm sure there's some really beautiful places in Spain as well. Particularly, I like to see up in the north near the Pyrenees. But anyway, I think there are some really neat things about seeing the different different sort of cultural, such significant changes in culture and very closely in region. Whereas in the United States, the culture is kind of the same across the country. I mean, there's obviously regional differences, but you don't see different languages and completely different, governmental systems going from one country to the other like you would here. Of course, I'll be back in about 3 weeks. I'm coming back here to Slovakia. It'll be the first time I've seen that country. So we'll see what that looks like. I'm excited about going to see that one because I haven't been there before. And then, of course, I'll be back in Germany again, speaking at another conference in both those countries in early November. So anyway, that's my sort of impression of Europe, or at least this portion of Europe. I think there are obviously some good, but I think from a opportunity standpoint, it's harder. It's harder to be here. That's why a lot of people want to come to the United States. And one of the great things about the U.S. is that it has traditionally been sort of the beacon of opportunity, the land of opportunity. I worry that, in some ways we are losing some of that, and, hopefully we can regain that. Anyway, guys, you guys take care. We'll talk to you soon.